Mage troops in Call of Dragons are the highest merit earning units in the game for low spenders and high spenders alike, but they are usually the most safe option and the option that is the easiest to play as because of their super long range. Now in this video, I'm going to go over everything you need to know for mages in terms of how to maximize the units, the heroes, the artifacts, the pets, like everything that's good on mages. How do you make them work best in this game? And why are they good? What's their pros, what's their cons, as well as anything else you need to know. So the first thing about mage really is about their long range. When you're fighting from very far in the field, you are able to take less damage and wipe out less often. You see that in general, you will do 1-3 to 1-5 ratio, where you take a certain amount of severely wounded units, but inflict way more, so earn very good merit. And also your troops remaining are usually not zero, so you're able to recall and heal without having to wipe your march, which makes you save a lot of wound unit in general in hospital and stuff. So in general in this game, unless you're a high spender, whale, and so on, it will be hard to maintain constant flow of units, especially if it's infantry or cav, because you keep sending them in, and in the general times they will wipe out. You will still earn good merits with them, but you will come back with 0 units to your base, and you will need to keep replenishing those units. So you need to have somewhat of a wallet behind to be able to do it indefinitely. Now every mage player and every player in this game should still be running some level of inf and cav to a certain extent, but it's harder to have just that. You most likely will have a few mage marches. Almost every player in this game will run a few mage marches, and this is kind of what I'm talking about here when I'm trying to explain exactly what's so good about mages and how to maximize that potential. Now if you are a free-to-play or low spender, I highly encourage you to maximize your mage potential, because that is what you're going to have the most impact with. And first thing you will do is choose the appropriate faction, which in this case is very obvious. It is the League of Order. Now the main reason why that is because of the fact that you get 2 different types of mage troops, the Celestials as well as the Vestals. Now everybody gets a regular mage in every faction, but everybody gets a special flying unit. And for the orcs and for the Spring Warden, it's a different unit. So a Spring Warden has a cav, and the orcs have some kind of flying archer, while the mages, Celestials, are for the humans. So this is a very obvious and very easy reason why anyone who is going to main mages in any way is going to be using League of Order. Not only is the flying unit for the Celestials much better than their counterpart, like the Spring Warden and the Orcs, their flying unit is not very good. The Spring Warden is very situational. It's okay for movement and cav and all the stuff, but it's really rarely good. And on the ground, they are worse than regular cavs. So this Celestial, on the other hand, is way better than regular mage. They have higher stats, and they are just better in general. So if you take a look here, you'll see the Celestial has 332 magic attack, as opposed to the Vestal, who has 292. So it's a difference. It's a good difference. It makes it much better. You have more damage, and they also have a passive that gives you 5% magic attack as long as you don't move for 4 seconds. Now this is not always possible in war, but it does happen. So I mean, this is something to keep in mind because it's significant, 5% attack, and it's not something the Vestals get. But on the other hand, one thing to always remember is that the Vestals, as well as every different race, has a buff that makes it so that they give some kind of buff around them. So in the case of the Vestal, it's HP. So one surrounding friendly legion will get 20% HP for 15 seconds. So this is a very, very significant buff. And this is something you should keep in mind. When you're bringing 5 marches, you might want to bring 1 with or 2 with Vestals and 2 or 3 with Celestials, for example. The Wilderberg also has stat on their mage. They bring attack buff, and the Spring Warden bring a defense buff. So again, the League of Order is better because HP is the best stat in the game for basically all unit types, and that is because HP is both defensive and offensive, making you having a higher percentage of troops doing more damage for longer even as you take damage, as well as making it longer to kill you, so you're more defensive, as opposed to just attack, which is just offensive, and defense, which is just defensive. So I mean, it's a whole thing in this game, but HP in general is regarded as the best stat in the game. So League of Order On top of that, also has 3% more magic defense for Legion. So, I mean, this is good against mages, which is something that you will get attacked by a lot. So, again, it's just a really good race, a good faction for anything mages. I don't need to really talk about it more. Any player who isn't a massive spender, you most likely will want to play with Mage and League of Order because you will get more units, less healing needed to keep fielding troops and stuff like that. And also, they're just better mages. And they enable heroes such as Thea, for example, which is a hero you will be using to get a lot of merit, even if you're free to play or low spender. So all in all, it is just the best faction for mages. Now, in terms of city skins, the Palace of Dreams, if you have it, magic unit HP, again, this is again what I said, HP is really the best stat for anyone, but mages included. In a situation where you can't have it, you can get this one, the new magic attack one. And I believe there's a few more actually that you can get that have the same stat. These are event skins that come every few months, and you keep getting some of them through events. Magic unique defense here at 5%. I have another magic attack here. And then, of course, if you're a high spender / well, there is the 10% one, which are very good. But the 5% HP here, the Palace of Dream, in my opinion right now, is the best skin to be using for mages, and it is what I do use and have been using for quite a long time now. Now, in terms of the best heroes for mages, now it will depend where you are in your game. If you're at G4 hero, it is very different than if you're still in the first seasons. So I will go in terms of the #1 investments and the most OP heroes, but there are many options as you progress. So Youngming is, of course, the undeniable #1 mage hero in the game currently. He is by far the most broken mage hero. Tons of AoE. He is absolutely amazing. If you are able to unlock him, and you do need to max him to get most of his potential, do so before anything else. He will gain you more merit with hit and runs and playing with cities or just open field fighting. You will gain more value from this hero than any other hero in the game with minimal investment, other than obviously maxing him, which is still an investment. But after that, once he's maxed, you will reap the rewards forever, as he is better than every other mage hero in the game currently by a huge amount. Now, he does better when used max with artifacts and all that kind of stuff, but he doesn't need it to do well. Even 5-5-1-1 people have been doing crazy 80,000, 90,000, 100,000 K merit reports. He's just so broken. So Youngming is going to be what you invest in my opinion, at all times if you are able to. Now, if you are in a season that's earlier, or if you're a spender of some sort, Lilia is #2, though she is, of course, behind a paywall. You do need to spend a certain amount to unlock her and to max her, but she will gain you, again, most value for the longest time, and that's because she has a high damage AoE, 3 legions taking 1200 damage, plus a Scorch that does damage for 5 seconds. And then this also has a chance to Scorch AoE. So, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. She does a lot of damage in AoE. She also has a skill tree, just like Youngming, which is a high damage skill tree, earning a lot of merit that way. So again, if you are a spender, this is going to be it. If you're not, even at 5-1-1-1 or 5-1-1, whatever you're able to give her, she's still going to be good. But obviously, Max is the best for her. Now, #3 would be, in my opinion, Tundilin. She's G3, so a little bit further into the game, but she is one that will bring some of the highest value in the game because of her AoE damage as well as her debuff. So the AoE damage is great. AoE in general will give you a lot of free merit because you're doing damage to other targets that are not hitting you back, but also having AoE just gives you more damage for free. But it's really just also about the debuff and how good it is. Now, this numbness in being inflicted, first of all, it happens on a consistent basis because her skill is a skill that follows the target for 6 seconds, dealing damage every 2 seconds. So she's inflicting some numbness over and over. This is a march speed reduction, which will help you and your team kill the enemy, catch them out of space. It's really just powerful, but also increased damage taken by 15%. So this is something that you're not only buffing yourself, but your whole team. So, I mean, Tundilin is one of those heroes that the more of them you have in the field, the better you do. She is just amazing, but she also gets a lot of good merit because of how much AoE she does. Now, the other thing that's really cool about her is the fact that everything else that she gives is buffs. She gives some healing, she gives HP, which is huge amount of HP. It's a really powerful buff. And she boosts attack as well as shields and healing if you have that, as well as this last skill, which is doing a lot more AoE damage. So her whole kit is amazing, but it works with everybody. So Tundalin as secondary to Youngming is, I would say, the #1 merit earning March in the game in terms of mages. You could also put her with Lilia though, there's no problem with that. You could put her with Bertrand, you could put her with really anyone, as well as you can put her as primary. Now, the one thing about being primary is that she has no skill tree, while she does a lot of skill damage, so it's nice to put her behind a skill tree hero, but it's not required, and the control tree does give a lot. Now, we'll go on talents a little bit later, but you know, it's an option to have a primary, and she still does very well, but she does even better when she's behind a skill tree hero, in my opinion. So it's another investment that is really high up, and it doesn't need to be max. Obviously, the more max she is, the better she is, and her last skill here is very good. But just having the first skill max does significant amount of damage and debuff that is worth getting her. Lastly, one other thing that is insanely OP about Tundalin is that right now in Call of Dragons, Bastion meta is the entire game. So people reinforcing Bastion and watching damage, wide damage kind of like go on for 5 hours is the meta right now. You're watching infantry attack each other in a Bastion and you just wait. So Tundalin has a special benefit, which is that when she attacks an enemy and casts her rage skill on them, you will inflict that numbness, the debuff, whatever, and this will prevent most of the time enemies from reinforcing a rally or a bastion. So if the people are reinforcing and you're around them controlling the open field, you're able to sometimes, it's not 100% proof because people will sometimes blink and stuff and still be able to get in, but you are going to give yourself a higher chance of blocking people from entering and reinforcing, which in itself, if everybody's running a Tundalin March and they're all strong, it will help you. Like, it's a really benefit to your team and to the game. So it's another reason why I think Tundalin should really be considered as one of the best mage heroes out there. Now, for other heroes that are good, it's not really an order because it will really depend. Of course, Velen is one of the best mage deputy hero in the game, I would say. Not only is he giving 20% march speed, which is insane, a very, very high amount, as well as skill damage. He also has a lot of AoE, and then he buffs everything, crit rate, damage, all that kind of stuff. So he's a very, very strong mage hero, but it's not a hero that is very defensive. Like, it's a squishier hero, and his damage is similar to Lilia. And he's also a hero that you will, for sure, at the beginning of the game, one of the best heroes in the game. But as time passes, doesn't stay as OP, being that other heroes also do bring a lot of good stuff. And lastly, really the reason is that you will be able to max him with his skills by opening gold keys. So you don't really want to mass invest into him too quickly, though he's still very good and you should still invest into him. And especially at the beginning of the game, you will do really good results with him. But it is not one of those heroes that you want to spend too much on because you will unlock him over time, and he doesn't need to be maxed to be OP, though. I mean, being maxed makes him really, really strong. So it's one of those heroes that it depends on what kind of spender you are, because you will unlock him without spending, but it will take, you know, a long time, many months, even more than a year. But depending on a little bit of spending plus slowly playing the game will unlock him. So, you know, just keep that in mind, though he is still obviously very, very powerful. Now, another hero I want to touch on is Mu. Mu is also a G2 hero, and she is a very overall hero, a very good hero that works with a lot of different marches. Now, she is an exceptional mage hero, AoE damage, great amount of damage, as well as she grants healing reduction, which is really, really powerful debuff the more healers are in the game, which is really much the case nowadays with Kuma and G4. She also grants a lot of healing to herself and grants a lot of buffs and also grants a lot of damage, as well as her Awaken, which is really, really good for rage and buffing attack. So, I mean, all in all, she's an amazing hero. She goes well with cav, she goes well with infantry, even kind of goes well with archers, depending on the march. But the point here is really that she is insanely strong as a support march to bring, not only to debuff the enemy, but also because you're healing a lot of AoE, and AoE healing, or healing in general in this game, same as shielding, grants a lot of merit. So this is a march that while you do bring her in the field, you're going to be earning a lot of merit for just having her around, buffing your friends and your other marches. So it's a very high merit earning march, not as much a high damage dealing march, but still very decent. And combined with Tia, which is also on my list of one of the best investment, especially if you got Celestials, like I mentioned earlier, where you're going to be using flying units, because then you're going to be gaining a lot of the buffs here, which is march speed and attack. So this is really, really powerful, and you gain a lot of attack here. Like Tia is a buffing machine who also gives a shield. Now, when you do max Tia, you will get that shield to 2 nearby legion, and that also grants merit. So this is why we see one of the best mage marches in the game currently, Mu and Tia together, and that's because they grant so much defense, buffing, shielding, healing, that they gain shit ton amount of merit, being that it is half of their merit maybe is done from the damage, half of it is done from the buffing. So it looks almost as good as a AoE damage march, like something like Lilia Velen, for example, but it is getting from buffing and healing, which in this also situation will be helping out your other march and your other team do more merit. So I mean, it's a win-win for your account getting merit, but for your team and your allies. So these two are two heroes that are very, very high on the ladder for best mages because of how much utility they bring to you, but they do kind of need to be maxed to get there. And while you will be the same as Tia as Velen, you will get her from gold keys long term. You will also be able to get Mu from gold keys now that they added the new thing with G2, but these are heroes that you will take time to unlock, and I would definitely spend into them after I've had a few other marches made. I would maybe not be my first march that I max, but it is a priority for a lot of players, especially if you want to play a support role, because they're just so good at supporting and bringing so much value to the battlefield. Now, I did talk about Young earlier, which is the best mage hero. Grimara also is the G4 hero that came with him, and she is exceptionally good. She's also an amazing garrison, and she opens up Tohar, Grimara garrison, which are broken, especially against swarms for mage players. So I mean, it's definitely something you can do, and she is very, very good. But from my own experience, Grimara, while is very good, she does have a stronghold defense or a city defense garrison skill, which is pretty bad. Actually, it's terrible. Tohar's skill is so much better. This is really, really bad because it's only every 10 seconds. So even as a garrison, this is trash, but I mean, it's still a good garrison hero. She's still amazing for swarm and rallies and stuff like that in your city, but it is such a trash skill, and it does do nothing at all for the open field. So she is kind of limited to 3 skills, and her Awaken is, in my opinion, the best, because the Awaken goes from damage boost of 200, which is good, but it's 15% hero skill damage buff. So the damage difference in the Awaken versus the non-Awaken is so massive that she's a very high investment hero. And while I do think it's worth it because she is very good, and she does give 15% skill damage as well as attack buff, as well as she gives more defense and defensive ignoring attack enemy, whatever. You know, she gives good stats, good skill damage, in general 40% if you have her maxed. It's really good. She's a really good hero, but it's not that much better or pretty equivalent to some other heroes. For example, you know, something like Talia also gives a decent amount of damage buff and also gives a decent amount of hero skill damage here. So like, she's not so much better than Talia. She's not much better than Thunderlin. If you have Young Ming with Thunderlin secondary, it's better, I think, or very equivalent to Grimara for open field. You know, she's just not that high level. Like, she's on the same level as many other mages, but she does need to be maxed to really, really be on that level of the higher end. And while she is maxed, and I put her with Young Ming, she does amazing, but it's not my highest priority investment, I would say, because she is so close to some other heroes, like I said, Talia. But Talia does not need to be maxed and offers almost the same amount of buffing. So at 5.551, Talia will do almost just as good as Grimara as a deputy to many of the marches in this game. Even someone like Tia does almost similarly as good. So it's just something to keep in mind. I do think Grimara is amazing. I do think she is one of the garrison hero that makes mage able to defend their cities with Tohar, and she's amazing for that. However, I don't think she's worth an investment unless you are really, really committed to mages or a spender of some sort. She might be someone that you will wait further down the line before you invest in her. Now, speaking of Tohar and obviously his friend Bertrand, now they are a very, very solid mage march, and they do very good single target damage. Now, they're not AoE, which is why I don't think they're higher on the list of wanting to invest in them and how good they are. They're a very, very good march. They do very good damage and earn me a good amount of merit on a regular basis, but I do believe that they are a march that requires a very high amount of investment to receive these results. while other marches with a little bit less investment will receive similar result. That's because they don't have an AoE, so you do need to be very strong and nuke the enemy very hard for all this stuff to work. And Bertrand gets a lot of power from his Awaken, and Tohar gets you know, a lot of power from all of his stuff, his Awaken included. If you don't have Tohar Awaken, it's really kind of not a complete kit. And you know, they're still good. You don't need them to awaken. Actually, Bertrand at 5551 does very decent. They're still very good heroes, and I would run a Bertrand 5551 with many other heroes as deputy. Tohar is not the only option, but you know, there are quite a few options out there. Thea being also one of them. I think Mu would even be fine. I just don't think it's something that everybody wants to invest in, because there are other options like Thunderlin, yeah, Youngming, that you want to invest in first, even if you can Lilia and Velen, you know, AoE debuffing marches, as opposed to Tohar and Bertrand, who are more of a one-trick pony, nuke one target kind of thing, but they're very good at nuking it. But again, the artifact, the pet, everything has to kind of be built around them. So it's a very high investment march. It's a very good march, but just keep in mind that you'll need to invest a lot to really make it shine in this game. Now, Tohar is still one of the best garrison for your city in the game for people who have mages, as opposed to Gromara. His second skill is extremely OP and does a ton of damage, and also buffs the army. So this is something that I find, I don't understand why Gromara's skill is so bad compared to his, but anyways, he also gains a lot of stats, a lot of buffs, counterattack damage boost as well, like he reduces it. So you know, a very, very powerful hero that also casts you know, this conduit all the time, which is very powerful because it's not a rage kill, so it happens more often than a rage kill. And also with heroes like Thea and Gromara, who have their bonus damage reset when a rage kill is cast, well, people like Youngming and Tohar do not trigger that, which is why they gain the buff 100% of the time, and which is why Gromara Tohar is so good at defending his city, especially against Swarm. I have had an experience with that, and I did test it out with different city garrisons here, and you can see that you know, Tohar Gromara is something else entirely. Now, one hero I haven't talked about yet, but is very, very powerful is Maggrat. Now, Maggrat is a marksman hero, but Maggrat does just as good as marksman as she does with mages, especially with celestials who have a high base attack. This and this are just damage that is not based on the unit type specifically, and it does work very, very well. So I've been running Thunderlin with Maggrat, or Maggrat Thunderlin. I do think Thunderlin first is maybe the slightly better option, and it works really, really well. There's some thing in that kit that just makes it work. Maggrat is just an amazing hero for mages, and 5551 is plenty for her because the last two skills do not bring much of a difference in her kit. So she's very low investment, amazing mage march. Now, of course, if you run her with her, you know, want to be best bet is going to be Zeta, who is the pairing for her, for archers especially. And also Zeta doesn't have a lot of like only marksman stuff. A lot of it is like deal more damage kind of thing, and crit rate and attack focus. So it's all normal attack based, which again works really well with Maggrat and with Celestials for some reason. But Zeta does kind of need to be maxed to really get a lot of her potential. But you don't really need to run her with Zeta, because Maggrat with Mu, even Maggrat with Thea, Maggrat with Thunderlin, and then it can be one of the other as deputy and primary. It will depend a lot on the talent trees you want to run and all that kind of stuff. But they're all viable options that you can run. So something to keep in mind, I do run Maggrat Thunderlin or Thunderlin Maggrat currently and do very well with them, as you can see right here. So this is my Thunderlin Maggrat running that I've been doing. In general, I will run basically these marches. You'll see, you know, Thunderlin Maggrat, Youngming Gromara, Mu Thea, amazing combo, Bertrand Tohar, Lily Velen. So it's a pretty standard build of mages in this game. And, you know, it's kind of what I believe are the best current marches, but a lot of that can be moved around, which is kind of one of the things that's great about mages too. Like, you can move a lot of heroes around. If you're using Celestials, you can put Tia as deputy to almost anyone. If you want to have a flying march, you can put her as deputy to Bertrand, and they're a super solid flying march. And also, ultimately, there's a lot of options for 5551 hero, like Maggrat and Thelia, for example, and even Bertrand, who are doing very well with not being maxed. So very high damage, low investment type of marches. Now, when it comes to pets for mages, it's pretty self-explanatory. There's not so many choice. The obvious choice is Sapphire Fade Rake. For most mage heroes, it will work. The reason is that it does AoE damage, so you do need to have a certain amount of spirit for it to work, and you will need the advanced Pain Bloom skill, which you need to buy when you win a season in the game, so it takes some time to get. But for every 155 point of spirit, you will hit an extra enemy legion, so you need like 310 spirit on your pet to really make this shine. And you can see that I am hitting 3 legion with that. If you don't have that, but you still have this skill, you'll hit 2 legion. And if you don't have, 2 legion, the pet becomes a lot less good. But I do believe that at 3 legion is when this pet becomes really amazing. Of course, the amount of damage that I'm doing here is like 400 times 3, so it's really good. Though this does make this pet pretty high investment, but it still is one of the really best pet for that, just because of this AoE. It's one of the only pets that AoEs for so much damage. Now, this is the newest pet, but the Flaming Manticore, in my opinion, is a close second, and even sometimes better, depending on the investment. So this is a pet that does a very high amount of base damage, but a bit of AoE on top of that. So the AoE is negligible compared to the Sapphire, but it does hit a few more enemies. And the base damage is much higher than Sapphire, because at 2-star, I'm doing almost more damage right now than my 3-star Sapphire. And at 3-star, this pet will do way more damage. So the initial hit is almost like 2 hits of the Sapphire. So not AoE, but a lot more damage there. Plus a little bit of AoE, which is still decent. Like, it's still a decent amount, especially because it's every second for 3 seconds. So it's like 75 times 3. Or if it's 3-star, it would be more than that. So, I mean, it's a very, very decent pet. I do think it's better than the Sapphire in many situations, especially if you don't have 310 spirit and the skill, because this one does not need that. Now, another reason why it's so good is that you will be gaining a buff that increases the damage that this does. So this very high damage already will be increased by a further 8% right now for me. I can max that at 7 stacks. And then I have this one that also gives me like 50%, 60, 70% more damage here. So, I mean, this damage will be pretty high when everything is maxed up and when you have really high stats. So it's another thing to keep in mind how good this pet is, and a little bit less investment needed, because I mean, this is still very good, but not as needed, even though I would still get it. But the 7 stack here, 8% damage each, this is really high, and it will add up to a very high burst pet with a little bit of AoE. So another very good option. The one thing to keep in mind though is that you will need a hero like Young Ming to really make this shine. Not only Young Ming though, there's a few heroes that will work. I think Thunderlin would work okay as well, because she does a lot of damage. Basically, every time you do magic damage via innate skill, so I mean one of their skills, not talent, you gain a stack up to 7 stack, and then these give you that boost. You can trigger it 2 times a second, so I mean Young Ming does kind of trigger it super often. Thunderlin also triggers it regularly because of her massive AoE amounts and the fact that the skill stays on enemies. Lilia triggers it less often, but kind of often still because of her Scorch and all kind of stuff. And then, there's Tohar and stuff that triggers it. Bertrand doesn't trigger it as much. So, it depends on the heroes you're using. Thea doesn't trigger it at all. So just keep that in mind, because it won't work with everybody, but it works with most of them. Shadow Fade Rake, this one is still a very good nuke one, but I mean, it's mostly a Bertrand Tohar pet, or maybe a Garrison against a rally, because it gives you very high burst damage, but only one target. And then it gives you a buff that, for me, it goes to almost 17-18% damage for 5 seconds. So it's very, very good, but it is not something that boosts many people other than Bertrand, because it's all about single target. So this damage on Bertrand will make his big nuke, which is already pretty high, be even higher. Very, very powerful for that, but not really any AoE damage. So the pet will get outclassed very quickly by how much damage a Sapphire does, or even the new Flaming Manticore. So, it's more of a single Bertrand type march. It can go around a few people depending, if you're doing a lot of single target on a target. Like, I mean, Talia and Rally does a lot of single target. Gromar also does a lot of single target. So it could work. Like, it's not terrible for them, but generally just not as good as the other 2 pets. Now, Seraphic Fade Rake, I'm a bit mitigated on this one. It's still a very good pet, and it is one that is made for like Thunderlin Talia, for example, but also very good for Maggrat, very good for Mu and Thea. This is a decent damage factor. Like, it's not bad, it's not amazing, but it also has healing. So when you gain a buff or inflict a debuff, you gain a stack. Once you have 6 stats, you will gain you know, 60% healing or 30% damage. So it boosts the healing and damage. So you're basically doing damage and healing yourself. Now, if you get this 3-star skill, it will give you a lot more damage. And the skill that I have right now here that you could also level up gives it so that more spirit increases the amount of stack that you get. So, I mean, if you get a lot of spirit, you will gain a lot more of this. Now, this is a level 1. It's not very good, meaning that you'll get, you know, way more stack and you will do a lot more damage and healing. So, I mean, it's a very good, but requires a lot of investment in this pet. And it will give you a lot of healing and do a decent amount of damage. But again, there is no AoE, and healing is very decent. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. But as a mage, I would rather do more damage than healing. So this has its place on multiple marches to stay in the field longer, but it requires pretty high investment to do so. It's a very good option. It's just a bit of option. Like, the healing itself is good for some of the kits, because like Thunderdin does have a healing boost in her kit. Moo does have variable healing in her kit as well, which, I mean, this is not really changing any of that, but something with Thea and Moo, amazing, because they're sustained march, so they stay in their field for a very long time, which is going to earn you a lot of merit, and they won't die, so their report will be high, and they will stay at higher HP for a longer time. So it is all very good. It's just the factors are pretty low, so it really needs to be really boosted, and you need to have a really good roll and everything to get this pet to really work and shine, as opposed to the other pets that you don't really need as much of an investment. Obviously, you still need some kind of investment for the Sapphire, a little bit less with the Flaming Manticore, and you will do a lot of damage, and it will be easier to do so for that. So that's just something to keep in mind, and that's why I haven't really gone for it in terms of maxing it or investing in it too much. Now, when it comes to artifacts for mages, it's very simple because there is not that many, and you are going to be limited on what you have available. So, of course, when you are going to be using Youngming, Dragon Fate is just it. Even if it's level 1, you don't need to be awakened and all kind of stuff. It is an amazing artifact, but its passive works when you do magic damage, and it can trigger every 2 seconds. So not every hero is able to get the trigger of this to the highest potential. Though, again, it works with quite a few heroes, but to a limited extent. Like Tohar, for example, kind of. Thunderdin, a little bit as well. Lilia, a little bit as well. But, you know, Youngming is really the one who shines and makes this artifact work. So if you are going to be using this artifact, Dragon's Fate, I mean, you kind of want to have Youngming in your march. But it is, in my opinion, the best mage artifact. I mean, it's the latest one as well, so it's pretty obvious why it's the best. It does a lot of damage, and the passive skill here, it adds up to a lot of extra little damage, because this is every, you know, minute and a half people cast their artifact skill, but the passive is every time, every second. It's just part of you. So I do believe that having these passives really changes a lot on how strong you can be in your march. So it's one thing to, you know, if you can have it at least unlocked at level 1, you will want to bring it. It's a really good artifact. Now, the Infernal Flame is a Lilia artifact. It's the best artifact for her, and not only because it does a really good amount of damage, but the additional effect makes it so that when you inflict Scorch, you gain 30% attack for 5 seconds, and then this triggers 10 seconds. So, I mean, it's up every 5 out of 10 seconds. So it's a very decent buff. It's basically like a whole passive skill extra being added to the march. So, of course, mine is maxed, and it's, you know, more damage and more attack and stuff like that. But even if it's not maxed, it brings a huge buff to Lilia, but you need to be inflicting Scorch. So this is a very unique artifact to Lilia with Scorch, not really for everybody else, but it's still okay with on other ones. Like, it's just the damage though. Like, there's really nothing else than the damage in that situation. So just to keep in mind, I mean, it's it's the best artifact for Lilia by far. If you're going to be maxing Lilia and using her, you must have this artifact on her. But if you don't really want the artifact as much. Now, in the same vein, Mirage Orb is kind of a Bertrand artifact, though actually it's not only a Bertrand artifact, because the additional effect is about gaining a buff through a hero skill. Bertrand does a lot of that, but he's not the only one who does that. So it can be used on quite a lot of different marches, and it's a really burst artifact. Like, it's an incredible high amount of damage artifact. You do 5,000 magic damage factor to one target, and almost 2,000 to enemies around it. Mine's not max, but it's pretty close. But this is really like, you gain 13% damage basically every time you gain a buff. So when you gain 3 buff, you have 40% damage on top of this 5,000. So this is, one of the hardest hitting artifact in the game currently. Very, very huge nuke. So it is an amazing artifact, but it doesn't, work on anyone who's not gaining buff. So you just have to make sure that the marches you're using are gaining buff pretty consistently. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. Like the time it takes to build the artifact, that's how much time you have to get the max buff, because afterwards, I mean, the cooldown is on anyways. So, just keep that in mind. Like even Tia and stuff, it gains a lot of buffs pretty quickly. You just need to cast a few rage kill and stuff like that. So just make sure that, you have a hero that gets buff and you can use this on anyone. It's really, really powerful. So Phoenix Eye is also one of the most polyvalent artifacts in the game for mages, because it doesn't have any extra effect. Now mine is exemplar, so it's a bit AoE and damage, but it basically hits 4 or 5 targets for thousands of damage. So it's very strong, very high AoE damage. It's a very good artifact. It can go on anyone and everyone. It just works well, and it provides attack, magic attack, all kind of stuff. So I mean, it's a really, really good artifact. So I mean, it's very easy to get as well in terms of it's part of like the general artifact keys that you get regularly. Like it's not one that you need to go for the Forge of Light and stuff like that. So many people will eventually get this artifact max without spending $1. So it's one of those things that you will get and use, and it's very good. You can use it on anyone for who you don't have an artifact that's specialized for. But if you have a level like 1 or 2 this Dragon's Fate, it's still better than, like, for example, a level like 3 or 4 Phoenix Eye, in my opinion. So it really depends, because these additional effects that give buffs and give extra damage, they make their marches much better, as opposed to just being damaged from the artifact and nothing else. Now, the Thunder Elegy is also one of the best artifacts in the game for mages currently, but like once again, we are having the additional effect, which is going to be from inflicting numbness, which is what Thunderlin does. Thunderlin inflicts numbness. So this is very, very good on Thunderlin. And if Thunderlin is deputy or primary in your march and you have this artifact, you should use it. It's really, really good because you will gain, damage taken reduction, and you inflict numbness all the time. But in itself, the artifact is a decent amount of damage AoE to many legions, and inflicts a silence, which makes it they cannot cast rage kill, also prevents them from going away. It's a very, very powerful artifact. Also has Legion HP on it, which is one of the best stats, as I said, in the game. So it's a very, very strong artifact. It's just you need Thunderlin in your march to really get the additional effect. So just something to keep in mind on that one. But even without Thunderlin, I mean, this effect itself is more utility than damage, even though it's still a decent amount of damage. But the silence and the block is really cool, really good. Can create some good plays, as well as prevent reinforcing and garrison, stuff like that. So I know if you do have this artifact, it's not like I wouldn't use it. But if Thunderlin is in your march, I would definitely use it then. Last but not least, the Breath of Gargantus, I feel like is often overlooked. If you are a massive whale and you have a lot of really exemplar, super strong artifact, sure, maybe you don't want to use it as much because it doesn't do any damage, but it does make 10 enemy legion have a lot less defense for a very long 20 seconds. And this gets higher, obviously, as you level this one up. This is incredibly powerful. If you're anyone that is low spender, medium spender, free to play, and you bring this, you will boost your alliance a huge amount every time you cast this artifact. So you should, even at level 1, it doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be high level. A level 1 Breath of Gargantus does a huge difference in the field, so you should be bringing it anytime you can because of that. Now, there's a few other artifacts in this game that will be incredibly powerful but are very situational. Visage of the Sanctus is one of them, but it is a flying unit artifact, so it works for flying units. Now, Bertrand Tia Flying March works really well. Mu Tia with Celestials works really well because it's a very defensive artifact that gives shielding. It does do some damage based on the shielding, and Tia does give shields, which is great. It's just, one of those artifacts that is defensive. So it's not something for everyone. It's tankier. It's more for, long term. So it's really for people who are running Mu Tia with Celestials, or Bertrand Tia, or, stuff like that. Very specific niche. You need Celestials for it to work. But when it does work, it's amazing. The damage factor that it gives is pretty high, and the shield that it gives is very high. This also doesn't cost a lot of rage to cast, which means you get it pretty quickly into the fight. And I mean, it also is going to give shield to yourself for almost as much as Tia's shield. So it's a very powerful ability and will make you last in the field much longer and do some decent damage. There's also the Magic Bomb for anyone who's lower spender. This is the best purple artifact for mages. It does a decent amount of AoE damage, and there is nothing wrong at all with it, except it's purple, so it has less of every stat. But the other thing about this artifact is that if you cast it on a Legion trying to reinforce, kind of like similar to Thunderlin's Rage skill, you will block them from reinforcing. So this is very, very powerful for the open field and from helping reinforcement garrisons and stuff like that. So even to the higher tier of players, people could be using this for the situation where it blocks people from reinforcing. So this is something to keep in mind. Similar as Thunderlin's artifact and the Time Bomb and Thunderling's main skill. These all have like silencing effect and prevent from reinforcing effects. So very, very powerful situationally. Now, when it comes to mage talents, there is quite a lot of opinions on what's good and what to do. So there's this whole speed sync thing, which is about having the same march speed on all of your marches. So if you're running 4 or 5 mage marches, you would like them all to have the exact same speed so that when you're going out in the field, you're dragging around kind of like one big ball of units instead of like some that will like be ahead of the other and one's faster like this. And then, you know, by the time you get to the enemy or by the time you're running away and stuff, some will be faster, some will be slower, and it won't work out as well. So the whole idea behind this is that you will go for different talents just to have all the same move speed. So for example, Lilia, who has the skill talent tree, she's usually paired with Villain, brings 20% movement speed in his kit right here, which means that you know, in order to have movement speed, you don't need as much in the talents. If you see here, I have the 15% and kind of everybody has the 6%. So I'm at 41% movement speed with this march. Now, for other marches to be at 41% movement speed, for example, Young Ming, well, he doesn't have 20% from the kit, so he still has this 6 and this 15, but he's missing 20%. So if you really want to go for that 41%, you'd have to get this 10% here and this 10% here. So you couldn't go into the skill tree max, meaning that you will have to kind of spread yourself around because you also don't want to gimp yourself too much. But you'll still get, you know, some skill damage here. Then you'll get one of these two, which is probably going to be this one. And then you'll get the movement speed. So then you'd be at 41. You would lose a lot of damage because the skill tree does provide a lot of damage. But you would have the same movement speed. So this can be done with pretty much all the heroes. Bertrand also has magic, PvP, and skill, so the same thing can be done with him. The other option here is going for 31% instead. So this is where you will basically not want to have 41%. So I mean, in the case of Lilia, she will have the percentage that comes from Villain, 20, and then 6, so 26, and then you basically will get 5 here. I guess 6 if you put 2 points, and you'd be at 31%, and then you could put other points at other places, or you could put her with Tia as secondary, which also gives the 20%, and then Villain could go with someone else like Thunderlin or like Young Ming, and then they'd have the 20% as well, and then they would have sacrificed their skill tree. So, you know, there's all things to keep in mind. In general, it's hard to get 5 marches at 41%, but it's doable with Tia and Villain, and then the other two, you sacrifice some of their skill. Thunderlin does not have the best talent options. There's a lot of movement speed to be gotten here, so you could do that with Thunderlin and get the high percentage as well. You're running Maggrat with Zeta. Zeta as primary also has mobility, so you can get the talents there to get the movement speed. Generally though, it is going to be beneficial to have the same movement speed when you're fighting a lot in the open field, but when you're fighting close to cities and close to flags and garrisons and stuff like that, I don't have as much of a liking for it because there's a lot of city hopping going, and people are like kind of just always staying in the zone here. Let's say you're fighting from this zone to this zone. Like your enemies are here, you're fighting here, you're back and forth a little bit. Like generally you don't move a lot when you're fighting. So it really depends how much mobility is in your fight. If you need that mobility and you need to be, you know, microing all them together, it's really good. But I don't find that on desktop, when I'm playing with my mouse and my keyboard with my keybinds and stuff like that, I don't get as much benefit from having the movement speed sync. So I personally don't use it all the time. I also find 41% kind of takes so much damage away. So if you are finding yourself getting caught a lot and you need more movement speed and your micro game is not that good, you might want to go for movement speed. Or if you're pushing kind of like adventurous when you're fighting enemies and you're going really in their faces and you want to attack the DPS of the enemy, not the tank. So you have to kind of go further ahead of the damage dealers, and then you're a target that gets targeted more. These are all things to keep in mind when you're playing mages, and it is viable. You will play differently. It's a whole different playstyle that has high movement speed. But if you're playing more in the back, safe, defending, around a garrison, around your cities, it's not necessary all the time. And if it is, you don't have to always go for the 41%. You can go, at least for the 21% here. And then if really needed, you can go for an extra 10% here if you really want it. However, if you are going for only damage, well, I think the skill tree is the best option by far. You get 8% skill here. You get the synergy here buff that can be cast when you get a buff, which is pretty high uptake on a lot of heroes. So you almost get the 10% all the time here. Or if you prefer, which is what I do, is the focus and raging tide, which is giving you a crit rate as well as crit damage. So this is really hard to get on anyone else. You almost find this on no one. Like only, I think Velen has some crit on his kit. So, I mean, crit means a lot of damage, and crit rate is really high amount of damage boost. There's also 8% skill damage here. Another 8 here, basically, if you attack for, if you stay in a battle for a while. So, I mean, this is a lot of skill damage being wasted if you're going for speed. But, not that it's not good. But again, you are gaining so much damage here. This is why I prefer this skill tree. This is what I go for. This is the general build. The only difference is if you have 2 heroes that cast Rage Skill, you'll go for Boiling Blood. If you have Young Ming, Tohar, heroes that don't have Rage Skill, well, you'll go for Spirit of Rage, because this will grant it to the one who has a Rage Skill, but it won't be wasted. This one is just completely wasted if you're, if you don't have a Rage Skill deputy or main hero. So just keep in mind that. And then usually you go for this tree here. So this is the go-to tree for most mages. As you can see, I'm using it on Lilia, I'm using it on Young Ming, I'm using it on Bertrand. So it's generally what I'm going to be using on most of my hero. Now I'm playing Maggrat Tundalin, and I'm using this weird tree that you saw here, which has no skill damage and like more healing. And I have this debuff, but I don't know. I think I would probably go for this one. This is against Kuma specifically. And then, I go for normal attack damage here, and I have some weird stuff going on. I do have some 10% here. I have 10% here, and I have the 6% here. So I'm having some move speed here. This is really, really good for the slow. So it's very powerful debuff. So I mean, this is my special Tundalin Maggrat tree, or otherwise you can go for the full precision tree on Maggrat if you're using mages, which is what I've done a lot too. And for like Mu and Tia, you have support and PvP. There's quite a few different things you can do. This is the tree that I currently had on my Mu with my Tia. I mean, there's a lot of different options, and again, move speed wise, it depends what you want to do. As of right now, I don't need that much on Mutia because she has 20%. So I have the 10% and the 6% here, which gives me, 36% right now with Tia. I could go for this here instead of going for this here, or I can go just this, and you would get less here, but you could still get a little bit more and catch up to the 41%. So it's all things to keep in mind. You want to go for 31%, 41%, or just go for the basic 20-something%, and some of them are faster than the others. It's how you decide to run your account. I generally am more often going to be in the skill tree, but it's not like the sync speed is not good. It's just depending on the situation on the war. So hopefully you found this useful. If you have any question on anything mage related, let me know in the comments. Make sure to keep an eye out, as I am going to be publishing another video talking about the best mage marches in the game currently, the best 5 mage marches, and how you can build them for low spenders as well as for whales, which some of which I'm using, but there's many different options because I don't have everything maxed either. So keep an eye out for that coming out shortly. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.